because IYDC is focused on youth from some African countries. So coming to learn from you all, having things that I'll go back and implement in my country, introduce it to my youth, introduce it to students in the university where I represent, it will be a great thing for me. And advocacy.
Let's hear it from Marama. Sarah Leon, who's telling us what she wants to get out of IYC. I want you guys to give a warm round of applause for our Minister of Gender. And then I look good, so I was late. And quickly, we'll just say our panelists before we get started.
Hi, my name is Ose Hineta Argan. I'm the U.S. Youth Observer to the United Nations, representing the United Nations Association.
And our moderator.
And I am Fatoumata Diallo.
And she's not my cousin. I know everybody.
Hi, my name is Jane Abu.
Hi, my name is Rory Menshine. I'm a UN youth representative, and I'm representing Coalition for the We Need and Humanitarian Codes.
So we'll take one more person from the panel. What does IYC mean to you? And then we'll pass it over. I have my friend there.
Yeah, so,
one last person. Give it to us.
I think this, for me, is like a great outreach and conferencing opportunity. Honestly, we have a living, breathing example over here. Mr. Just Derek Chen, who I literally met yesterday, but now have already recruited into one of my gigs. So it's a very fluid, I think, conference, and I think I just really like that. And also it's a little bit smaller, but I think it's better. It's more tight knit. I got to network with pretty much everyone in this group, which is nice.
Awesome. So you know that IYC is a hybrid conference. So we have tons of people online, but whenever we find ourselves someplace, we try to have the community where we are also involved. So for us, this is big. And the first day we had over 70 people, and the building security was trying to kick all of us out. It's really good because we also don't want to just be online and forget where we are. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much. And we apologize in person and also online. It's Sunday, what can I say? And it's raining in New York. But I think we're not starting that late. And I think we have a super, super duper charged day 4. And I think you're not going to regret being here. Before I leave, I'm going to give a shout out to Sacred Heart High School.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hawa Diallo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, dear young leaders. I'm so glad to see that there's so many of you in this room and representing the world. And dear, welcome to you all. And of course, I want to start by saying all protocols observed. My name is Fatoumata Diallo. I am from Guinea-Conakry. I grew up in Belgium and now I live in London. And I am the founder of Gamal, which is going to be the largest homemade food app in the world, currently in the making. So I want to quickly start by saying that it's truly an honor to be moderating this session for the International Youth Conference during the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. And this theme on partnership for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and collaboration for a better future is actually very, very dear to my heart. Because in fact, I was a young girl growing up in Belgium, Brussels, when the Millennium Development Goals came to existence. And then in 2015, world leaders met again, and they extended the initial 8 goals to the 17 ambitious global goals to be reached by the year 2030. With, of course, as you all know, the aim to end poverty, save the planet, and improve the living conditions of the global population, amongst others. Now, having been in a sort of, current critical milestone with 2 things in mind. So currently, we are at the midterm, halfway through to the conclusion of the Sustainable Development Goals. And on the other side, we have this growing young population around the world. In fact, I was looking at the statistics yesterday, and according to UNDP, 1.8 billion people in the world are actually between the ages of 15 and 35 years old, which makes it a quarter of the global population. And this is actually the younger generation we've ever had, but also at the same time, the most educated generation. So now we are with this situation here where we have these very ambitious and important goals, and we have this young generation with a lot of talent. And so the question is, how do we harness, how do we leverage this talent to make sure that they're not actually sitting on the sidelines and being spectators, but rather being actors at the forefront in accelerating and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is the scene, and we are gathered here today, and we are going to try to answer this question. So, youth partnership, Sustainable Development Goals. And on this panel here, joining me are Honorable Aissata Mahoy, who is the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs of the Republic of Sierra Leone. And Honorable Aissata is a staunch human rights advocate, defender with over 20 years experience promoting equality, addressing discrimination, promoting guidance on gender-related issues, including gender mainstreaming and women's empowerment, as well as peace and security. Welcome to you, Honorable Aissata. Thank you. Next, sitting on my right is Jane Abuba. We're actually both from the same country, so pleased to meet you in person. And so Jane Abuba is a dedicated advocate for social change and international development with a solid commitment to empowering women and girls and marginalized communities. Next, we have on my far right, Rory Monshane is a human rights advocate. Again, this panel is all about human rights advocates. I love it. So human rights advocate with more than 10 years experience in people-centered policy and communications. And you work on the local, national, and international level. Graduate from London School of Economics. Most of you know that's very well-renowned school in the United Kingdom. And Rory also is the first disabled delegate to represent the United Nations Youth at the G20. Yeah, welcome. And last but not least, on my left is Ose Ohianeta Oregon. Did I do that well? Thank you. So Ose is a journalist and a community organizer with passion for LGBTQ plus rights, focusing on queer and trans youth of color. They have received numerous accolades, including being named a GLAAD 20 Under 20 Rising Star. Congratulations. And since 2018, they have been an active member of the United Nations Association as a youth observer. Congratulations. Thank you. Right. So now with the panel being introduced, I think we can kickstart into the first question. Something that I've noticed during this whole week of UNGA, some like a common thread was collaboration, partnership, right? So in your experiences, how can youth-led partnerships address the unique challenges of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? And I will start with Honorable Aissata.
Okay, greetings everyone, and first and foremost, I would like to say thank you very much for giving me the platform to showcase what my country has done so far and what are the gaps in the area of how to address them when it comes to achieving the SDGs. For me, I think we need to attach some amount of seriousness into the goals themselves, because the reason why I'm saying this is we've got barely 7 years to 2030. How many countries have actually sat down to ensure that they are checking or actually monitoring how the implementation of the goals are going? When you look at poverty reduction, which is the first goal, I think what we need to do as a planet is how to identify youth entrepreneurs so that they can also be partners in development, and collaborating with civil society organizations and governments in terms of creating entrepreneurship that will create job opportunities for young people. It can be regional or sub-regional or national. But we need to have coalitions or platforms where we bring these youths together in terms of trying to ensure that we encourage them, create the enabling environment wherein we will provide the opportunities for them to create employment opportunities for younger people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I hear about providing an enabling platform where actually young people can be job creators,
Exactly.
and therefore we can achieve faster.
You create job and you employ more young people.
Fantastic. I love that. What's your take, Oze?
Yeah, so one thing that I think we've really hit home this week during UNGA is we're 50% of the way towards 2030 when we're supposed to have achieved the SDGs, but we are not 50% of the way towards achieving the SDGs. I think it's closer to less than 20% of the way, and that's something that Secretary Gutierrez is very, very concerned about, as am I, as I'm sure the rest of us on this panel. When we talk about SDG 17, like collaboration for the goals, a lot of times people consider that like country to country collaboration, NGO to NGO, business and individual countries. And I think that we need to start bringing in youth to that conversation. From the conversations that I've had with our student chapters across the country, students aren't just identifying problems or like identifying issues in their communities. They're also identifying the solutions to those issues on a small scale, sometimes on a large scale, but overwhelmingly the individuals in those communities fixing the problems that are there. If you give a student org $500 to fix a problem in their community, they're going to do a lot more with that $500 than a large nonprofit is going to be able to do. And so I think that it's really important that when we're thinking of new and creative ways to achieving things like SDG 1 or like gender equality, like young people, I'm not saying that we're going to solve world hunger. However, I am saying that we can feed our community. Like, and that's doing something that is making incremental change. I think that in addition to the overarching, large, widespread change, the top-down change that will be made from the government, from the big NGOs, from business, there's opportunity, a wealth of opportunity to create a tidal wave of grassroots change that starts with our youth-led programming, and making sure that they are well-funded and empowered to do things is essential to achieving the SDGs.
Fantastic. Also, I love what you're saying, and I'm going to quickly chip on that. I've been attending the CSW for the past 7 years, and I always get frustrated because the conversation stays at the top and it doesn't trickle down to the youth. So I returned to the UK and nobody knows about anything about these very important conversations, and nobody knows about the SDGs. So, what you emphasizing here is really ensuring that young people are part of the dialogue. Not only they're good at pointing at some of the issues that are going wrong, but also they're coming with innovative solutions. They're coming with innovation, they're coming with solutions. And so making sure they're part of the conversation and dialogue is absolutely critical because they are, in fact, the future, right? So I'd love to hear, Jenna Buba, what's your take on that?
I would say that youth-led partnership can significantly contribute to achieving the SDGs to fresh perspective, like innovative idea and their high level of motivation. And that can be also done through the use of technology, to solve the SDGs related problems such as climate change and education. And also these youth and this partnership also let young people have a say, like in various decision making that at the SDGs that consider their needs and dream as well. And also these youth partnership like connect young people from all over the world, basically, and helping them to work together to tackle common challenges in changing and making positive impact everywhere.
I really love this. And you know what you said about this is a platform. And I think one of the, somebody in the audience mentioned, the International Youth Conference is an outreach platform.
Yeah.
And, what you're saying is actually emphasizing that it's actually this platform is for young people to connect, to share common, challenges and learn from each other and work together and collaborate, which is in fact the theme that we're discussing about. So I think that's really important indeed. I totally agree with you that, this is a platform for young people to connect and learn to collaborate and work together. Thank you so much. Rory, what's your take?
Sure. I just wanted to talk about the benefits of partnerships in general and then go into the benefits of specifically youth partnerships. I think that we all want to make the world a better place. It's just a question of how are we going to go about it, right? I don't think anybody would disagree with any of the SDGs, eliminating poverty, eliminating hunger, and all of those types of things. But it's a question of narrowing down exactly how we're going to do it. And I think that the benefits of youth partnerships is that we are the most educated generation out there. We are going to find innovative and creative solutions. But I also think that it's important for us to facilitate a dialogue with one another, not just in our local communities, which is very important, but also on the national and international levels as we define what this world is going to look like as we inherit it. So I think that's what's incredibly important as well.
Fantastic. Facilitate the dialogue. And I'm going to take that into our second question, which is we live in the digital world and which is moving faster than ever. And so we're seeing new tools coming up, all the time with recently, ChatGPT, etc. So I'm interested to know how we can leverage technologies such as ChatGPT and also all the social media platforms, TikTok, YouTube, and everything else. How can we leverage it to actually, trickle down this dialogue so that it reaches everybody from across the world? Because it really takes a global force to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It really takes global collaboration, youth from all around the world. So now how do we reach these young people using technology? So using the technology in the right way, using technology to push for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, because mostly social media platforms are used for entertainment. So I'm interested to know, in your perspective, in your experiences, how can we leverage those to progress the Sustainable Development Goals? And once again, I'm starting with Honorable Aissata.
Okay. First and foremost, the youth are the ones that are purely engaged in terms of accessing digital technology. But you have to also take into consideration those countries which we think maybe the rural communities do not have access to those communities. How can those youth benefit or participate in the advancement of the SDGs? As we speak, I'm not sure how many young people understand actually what are these goals. So we need to leverage on them as well. We need to get them involved in the fight against poverty eradication, ending hunger, quality education, and this. So we need to go down to the local community levels, bringing ourselves into platforms or forming ourselves into networks of young people. I feel old actually, I'm saying this, but I feel older more
In this
you all. So I think going down to the community people with our platforms, trying to educate the other people that do not have access to technology. Some people do not have access to mobile phones. How do we reach them? Maybe taking a form of sensitization that they will see photos and then pure explanation, proper explanation on how the SDGs were framed and for which reasons, and what are the gaps that needs to be addressed, and how their involvement will be able to change, to create a change. Because what happens in my country is that we have young people live in rural areas because the rural areas are not attractive. They come to urban areas in the process of, I want to go to school, I want to earn a job or white collar job, forgetting that there is agriculture in the rural provinces. There is land which is fertile, arable. They too can be involved in terms of maybe participating in food production processes. My country, the flagship program for this government is ending hunger, bringing food to the table. So the young people too can also participate. But they need to understand that it's only their participation will help solve the problem, not only relying on what government does. We are there blaming government on what to do and what not to do, but we do not actually, the young people do not actually participate fully because the technical know-how is not there, the understanding of the SDGs is not very much clear to them, so there is more that needs to be done, how to scale up the understanding, creating the awareness among the young people, and using the platforms as well, like the social media handles, the social media networks, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is very renowned and very easy. So they can also create some kind of animations for those that have access to those media platforms, and so that they understand, even because a lot of people that access social media is for, so some of them is for the wrong reasons. So
That's
we
right.
need to sell the SDGs.
Absolutely.
For each of the goals, we need to prepare some documentary evidence or some skits or some kind of animation that will help people understand what is it about. I think that's my take.
Thank you so much, Honorable Aissata. So really, what you're saying, what I'm getting from it is really access.
Yes.
Access to information, to the
Exactly.
right information,
Exactly.
especially for those groups that are in rural areas
Exactly.
and they do not know what the SDGs are. In fact, they may not even know that such thing exists.
They have to
So
be
how do
involved
we
in the
reach out to
process.
those groups that are, so also I'd be interested to know, based on your experience and being in the first world, having access to all of these tools, how can we leverage these platforms to communicate the SDGs and make it mainstream, right? Because really what's coming out is social media, digital platforms are used mostly for entertainment. But here we have these important milestones, which is for the benefits of the whole of humanity, and especially us, the future generation of leaders. How do we, in your experience, can leverage these platforms for that?
Yeah. So I'll be the first to say social media, technology, they're tools. Sometimes used for good, sometimes used not great, sometimes just used for entertainment and pleasure. There's nothing inherently wrong with technology. There's also nothing inherently amazing about it. It just depends on how you use it. And so I'm glad that we talked about education on the SDGs. It's a really big part of my role. One of the things that's really exciting for me is being able to connect the work that young people are already doing to the SDGs. What I've found, at least in the United States, if you don't study political science or international relations, you might not be that interested in the SDGs. Super fair. That's not your bread and butter. However, that's not to say that the work that you're doing in your local communities isn't actively making progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. The feminist book club that you're hosting at your school because your teacher isn't teaching books by women, that is promoting gender equality related to the SDGs. The food bank that you volunteer for to get credit for your IB class, if you're doing CAS hours. I was there. Yeah, it's rough. But that's promoting no poverty. In your own ways, young people, even if they don't know what the SDGs are, more than likely are making progress towards achieving the SDGs in their communities. And so I think creating accessible language to say, you don't have to be a political scientist, an economist, an environmental sustainability expert to be doing work in the SDGs. It's work that you're doing every day. I think that makes it more real to folks who thought that they didn't care, but actually that thing that they're really passionate about, that's not international relations, that's already SDG work. So we start there to bring people into the conversation who might have already checked out. Now, in terms of how we use social media, I think if you mentioned specifically ChatGPT, and I want to provide some concrete examples of how I've seen it used really well in terms of community engagement. So there are a lot of barriers to students being able to participate in student organizations. Say you're a student organization of 4 people and you're trying to host an event and you want to bring 500 people. That's a lot of work for those 4 students who also have homework and have to cook their meals and have to walk their dog and have to make their beds. Using ChatGPT to design a poster, that's something that the communications director doesn't have to do. Using ChatGPT to design the template for the email that you're going to send out inviting your students, that's one thing that your communications director doesn't have to do. So using those tools to mitigate some of the work, you still have to do the work. You still have to send out that email to the students and make sure that they they come. You still have to physically blow up the balloons or order the pizza. But there are ways that you can use social media to enhance the work that you're already doing. It shouldn't take the place of hard work, dedication, education. However, it can enhance and amplify the work that you've already put in, the dedication that you've already put into your craft. So absolutely use technology. Don't be afraid of technology, but don't let it replace your brain, your work ethic, your dedication to your goals. Like, make sure that those two things are never in conflict with each other. They're always working in tandem.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And so here, really, what I'm taking out for what you're saying is creating an accessible language. Why accessible language? A lot of people can't relate to, the SDGs, right? It sounds too fancy. It's too far from us. You got to go to the UN. You got to be an ambassador. But actually, it encompasses every aspect of our daily life. So looking at it from these lenses, just like going to shop in your local market, it's like, is part of the SDGs. So in a way, we are all ambassadors of, like promoting the SDGs
Absolutely.
in our day-to-day behaviors and habits. So that's one thing you mentioned. And the other thing about, the tools are there to be leveraged to enhance our work, not to replace certain aspects of the human, the humanity itself, but like it's there for us to leverage to make our work easier and make our work better or faster. So Jainabu, what's your thoughts about this topic so far?
Okay, so in my opinion too, to add up on what they already said, we can use social media or online communities to share information, because you mentioned that like youth, most of them don't have knowledge about the SDGs. So we can use that platform as people that already know the issue, we know the challenges or even the SDGs, as she mentioned, to share information, ideas, experience, that will foster global awareness and also collaboration around the SDGs. And also there is some other platform like crowdsourcing or crowdfunding that those youth-led partners can use, or even the youth like to facilitate resources mobilization, because there is a lot of those youth that have good projects that are yet to be implemented, but because of resources they don't have. But using those platforms, you can mobilize funding for your project. And then also you talked about AI, artificial intelligence, to add up on what you said. Also, those artificial intelligence can really help us, helping the youth identify like trends, like gaps and area where youth can really intervene, that it's really needed to be intervened. It can showcase all of those. I think we can leverage that by using it correctly to share messages on people around us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jainabu. I totally agree with you. Those platforms can be used, and in fact, they're used for information sharing, ideas, and experience. But I love something else you mentioned about, in fact, Honorable Aissata, in the first question was talking about how entrepreneurship is actually the way forward, because then young entrepreneurs will create jobs and therefore will employ young people, right? Mm-hmm. So, and here you're giving me an example where we can leverage these platforms like crowdfunding, because funding is always an issue, right? It's always a huge barrier. Mm-hmm. But now you have access to literally the world, and who can contribute in helping you raise the funds you need in your entrepreneurship journey. Mm-hmm. And also identifying trends, what's coming up, and how can you prepare ahead, and how you can anticipate, like, maybe there's going to be a shift here, or this is going to change, this is going to go in that direction. So all of these tools can be leveraged in that way. Thank you so much. How about you, Rory?
Sure. I think that it's important to talk about how technology is being used in general to achieve the SDGs, and then we can talk about exactly how it can be better used to amplify the SDGs. So right now, technology is actually doing a great job of addressing the SDGs, because if you look right now, there's a lot of different massive open online courses to better educate people, and there's a lot of MOOCs that are focused specifically on the SDGs that can be used to actually help people better understand what they are. But of course, that's appealing to a very specific demographic, and you have to know what the SDGs are in order to look them up. But generally speaking, it is being used to automate and to essentially simplify a lot of different challenges that we have today. I think that it's being used to reduce inequalities, because you'll look now that there are a lot of hybrid conferences, there's a lot of hybrid events, whereas previously you had to go to events in person, which was, and we discussed this even before today's conference started, it's very expensive to have to go in person. You know, when you have a lot of in-person conferences, that creates a financial cost to participation, whereas technology can be used to better include diverse voices that may or may not have been included otherwise, and get different input from different regions so that you can really see yourself as a global citizen. Now, technology is not perfect. There's a lot of challenges to technology. A lot of people here have mentioned the fact that not everybody has access to broadband. It depends on where you are, right? It's a question of, do you have access to the technology that you need to participate? There's also a question of accessibility in technology as well, because I represent a lot of disabled communities, and a lot of times conferences are not accessible to people from my community. And so there's a question of how we can improve it to better include those voices. And now you mentioned the rise of popular media as well, like TikTok and stuff like that. And I want to echo some things that Ose had mentioned too, because I thought that was I thought that was brilliant, in the sense that like we are all advocating for the SDGs, we just may not know it exactly. So it's a question of how we're framing it. But if you look at how people use social media right now, they are using it to amplify their causes. They're using it to amplify their voices. They use it to mobilize people to, for example, go out and vote. It's just a question of how do you frame that? How do you connect that to the SDGs? And I think that the UN in general needs to do a better job of marketing the SDGs so that people realize that it is a part of their everyday lives. And so, yeah.
Fantastic. Indeed, I couldn't agree more. It's all about how you frame it and how you can make it accessible enough and simplify the language so that everybody can relate. And everybody can understand, actually, me going to shop, to the supermarket is related to this goal, and this is what I'm doing. This is my input into achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So really reframing the language and making it easy and accessible in a way that everybody can relate. And you mentioned something else about, of course, online courses, but I wanted to tip on the conferences. So, here, this moment that we are in right now is a really good example of leveraging technology. We probably have more people watching us live than we have people sitting in this room. And this is really awesome, because for many years, like when I was coming to the CSW, we are talking a theme. There was a year, I think 2018 or 19, the theme was about, empowering girls from the rural and the rural areas from the world. But you look at the room, there's actually literally nobody from the rural world. So it's like we are talking about them. Without them, they were not represented. So I'm glad that, this example here, definitely there are more people watching us live than sitting in this room. So this is another great example. So now moving on to the next question. I'd love to hear about concrete examples of successful projects that were led by young people. What is it? What lessons have you learned from that? Anything we can pick up from there. Honorable Aissata, in Sierra Leone.
In Sierra Leone, we have what we call ValueNet. It's an organization which was formed. ValueNet is a voluntary involving organization network, ValueNet. So it encourages young people to work together in terms of changing the cause. The concrete example I will give is the one which was organized by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. So they encouraged these youth, then they mobilized into groups, and then involved in tree planting. Yes, so they planted many trees, because what we have in Sierra Leone, a lot of deforestation is ongoing. And if you have heard about Sierra Leone, we have history of flooding, environmental degradation and landslides and this. So the youth group themselves together, mobilized by this ministry, and then they form themselves to be planting trees. So in the next few years, we believe that the trees will be able to protect the environment, especially in the urban areas, because we do not want to see a repeat of those natural disasters that we have envisaged in the past. And we want to see more involvement of the youth, the young people themselves. And another thing is there are some young people who have formed themselves into groups again that looking at promoting gender equality. So we have had a history of sexual gender-based violence a lot in Sierra Leone, and the young people are taking charge now in terms of even talking about it on social media, organizing conferences that attract international guests like Garnet, which is being headed by a very young girl who has brought lots of people from overseas to participate in our conferences. In October, she'll be having one of the conferences as well, bringing more guests from other countries, all in terms of promoting gender equality and then also reducing the risk of sexual violence against women in Sierra Leone. So these are very concrete examples. And we'll keep seeing that the reporting landscape is there now, is very high, because before now what happens is when a sexual or gender-based violence or rape is being committed, mostly within the family, they conceal the information. People do not know about it. So now people get to talk about it as a result of the sensitization. And a lot of young people are being involved in this as well. So because the society or people think that once a crime is being committed against a young girl or a woman, and it goes public, it's a shame to the family. So this is why they were concealing this information. But now, because the information is out there, and linking them to the SDGs of protecting the girls and promoting gender equality, I think more reports are coming in now. So we have, as a government, have gone a long way, in fact, of making rape as an emergency, state emergency. And also we're now prosecuting a lot of people. A lot of people are behind bars because of that. And then we have also established what we call the sexual offense model court, a court that is only trying people that are perpetrating violence or sexual violence against people. And the legal framework is also there. So there is the environment which Sierra Leone has built in terms of promoting those SDGs. The legal framework has seen very good reputation in the recent years when we have brought out laws. In fact, as recent as in 2022, we have the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Law, which has now got a lot of women being involved in politics and governance and leadership position. This is why, in fact, one of the reasons why I'm seated here. In our last government, we had about only 18 women in parliament. This government, we have 42. Because of what the law has said. And for ministers, the cabinet ministers, we had only 5. Now we have 10 full cabinet ministers and 11 deputy ministers that are female. So the increment is there, and then more positions are on the way, because we're looking at female ambassadors, that will be placed in other places. So the women in leadership position, the situation has changed over the years. So, and then if you look at our cabinet as well, we have many young people. I am old, I keep telling you. But we have people at the age of 28 years, they are young to be in cabinet, and it is first in history. And the president keeps saying he does not regret his action, because he employed many people in cabinet, and young people and young women as well to be there. So we have created that change, and we want to see the momentum continues, even to allow the law, the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Law, to be passed in parliament. Many countries are struggling to get it. So Sierra Leone is a case in study. And for the CSW, we'll come and showcase what we've done, how we went through the process for us to be able to achieve that as a country within the African region.
Wow.
Can I also say something that's really exciting is the ministers, they're not just young, they're also former activists, like organizers,
Yes.
people who were,
Yeah.
involved in community work. And like, when I look at representation, like that's the kind of representation that I'd like to see in my country. And so like, it's amazing. Like, even as people who are not from your country, like we see the work that's being done in terms of representation, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and if I can add, and then also that's also showcasing even at the UN, because most of the time when I attend various like events, well, each time I see like an African people, I say, "Where are you from?" Sierra Leone. Where are you from? Sierra Leone. I'm like, "Is the only Sierra Leone youth here?" Yes.
Right.
And then even Auntie Hawa here, she's making so that all the youth is represented. This is really an amazing work, and then really continue in that sense.
I
wanna
want to
add
quickly,
that too.
go ahead, darling.
I was going to say that that's also something that's so powerful and impactful too, because a lot of young people think that politics is just so distanced from them because they look at who's representing them. And I can speak for the United States. Like, we have a lot of people that are representing us that are not necessarily representative of what the population is. And so they're like, well, politics is so distanced from me. It affects my everyday life, but like, it's not necessarily somewhere where I can see myself. And I think that the work of Sierra Leone is somewhere that we can look to for inspiration and say, like, we can see ourselves as young people represented in positions of power. And so we don't necessarily frame ourselves as like too young to do it. And so I really do appreciate that work.
Well, amazing. I think this question was really, really interesting because we
Yeah.
got the panel and to literally chip in straight. But I, first of all, wanted to say congratulations for the incredible job you're doing on the ground in Sierra Leone, literally taking, like, being a role model, right? Not only for the African continent, but like being a great model for the whole world to watch and learn from. And I really love the examples about planting trees, because one of the goals of the sustainable development is, protecting the environment and sustainability for the future, right? And also you mentioned something about gender-based violence, and what's coming out of that is now the reporting mechanism is changing. And now we're having like a policy change from that, and we're having new laws coming into place. This is really amazing. And I love, like, the fact that, women representation in leadership position is actually growing. It's like, this is the door opener. This is really, really, really amazing. I don't know whether you wanted to share like some concrete examples
I'd love
from,
to if there's time.
we have like probably 2 more questions to go through, and then we'll open the floor for some questions. But I'd love to hear, like, from the work that you do as a youth observer, like, any concrete example where you've seen some positive change, and what can we learn from that?
Yeah, so feedback that we got from our young people was the youth who were doing organizing work are very tired of being brought into spaces to share their perspectives and then being excused from the spaces when the decisions were being made, when it was time to enact the research study, when it was time to write the policy. The nothing about us without us extends from the idea of change to the implementation of change. And youth were frustrated, myself included, that the youth participation component of that was not seen throughout and through fruition. And so something that our team at the United Nations Association, particularly the Youth Observer, has done for the past at least 5 years is write something called the American Youth Priorities Report. It's a document that each Youth Observer writes after talking with our youth members across the country about what their priorities are in terms of the SDGs that are most front of mind for them, in terms of the organizing efforts that they're doing in their local communities, in terms of the actual impacts that their organizing efforts are having, in terms of numbers. And we take that information and we write a report. We write the facts and findings, we write the statistics, we write the stories of individual youth members that are creating success, and then we're able to take that document. So when I have meetings with the Department of State or with our UN leadership or with individual congressmen, and they're like, well, I don't know, we can't bring them in because we don't know what's going on. Like, there's physical documentation. I think a lot of times young people are brought in to share their stories and never to share their research. And so one of the things that we've done as youth observers is to provide that research, that youth-led and youth-driven research, so that when it comes time for an individual to say, I need a young person to represent environmental sustainability on this council, but I don't know the person, we can say, well, we have a young person who we interviewed for the American Youth Priorities Report who's working on this particular SDG and has this particular amount of reach in their community. It's a way to legitimize the work that, in my opinion, is already legitimate, but needs that seal of approval from some type of factor figure. And so for us, that document has been incredibly important in providing legitimacy to the youth activism and advocacy that goes on in individual communities across the country. And so that's what I share with you as a concrete example of how youth empower other youth to create spaces for themselves.
Do you know, I want to, the word legitimize, that's really powerful because you've really ensuring the end-to-end process. You spoke about the reporting mechanism and like actually following through from theory to the implementation. And sometimes that actually lacks. You would come, you'd be invited to speak, and then that's it. And yes, wow. So I really love that as an example of following through, and coming back and challenge the status quo. And this is the way forward. Thank you so much for sharing. Jainabu?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to share an example of two organizations, if we have time, that I'm part of. The first one is BBAD, Building a Brighter African Diaspora, which we focus on empowering African diaspora through mentorship, educational program, and so on. And we bring those African diaspora into table of looking what is the issue that Africa right now is having, and then putting them through to come up with projects that can be solution to those challenges. And then after having those projects, going to look for funding in order to be implemented. So we are now at the stage that we have around 4 projects. All that is included in SDGs for 5, 10, and 17. And also one of them will be in Ghana, and it will be for Skill Them All. We have noticed that Ghana, for example, has a lot of youth that graduate but don't have a job. That's most of African countries, but based on the result that we have, we saw that it needs to be fixed there. So that's one example of the project. We have also one in technology. We have recycling, because also Ghana, I'm not against Ghana, but we found out also, those e-waste, they have like a huge area in Bashim, in that area where it's killing mostly people because of the air that they are breathing. So we have come up with that project in order to have a solution in that area too. And also the second one is the African Women Project, and that from the National Federation of Business and Professional Women. So when my coworker and I came up with that project, because there was that issue in Afghanistan, and there was a lot of women moving to the US. And as an immigrant like me, when I came, I had like a lot of issue with languages, because I come from a French country and speaking English was really hard. So we came with that project really to empower these Afghan women through educational program, and also through we connect them with the city church for English and so on. So I'm seeing her. So just
they gave me the sign that we have 15 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
So, but I thank you so much for, I can tell you definitely passionate about, these projects that you're running with that organization.
Talk about this.
Yeah, I can feel it's coming from the heart. Thank you so much for sharing. And you mentioned something about, mentorship. Mentorship is really important because it's actually the way to break the barrier to access. Right. So thank you so much for sharing and great job with that organization helping the African women navigate through. Thank you, Jainabu. Rory?
I'll keep it quick.
Yeah, let's keep it quick.
I got you. So I know that there's a lot of wonderful infrastructure that's already out there that youth have to advance the SDGs. I think that OSA's position is a great example of infrastructure that's out there to advance the SDGs. There's also the G20 Youth Summit delegations for all the different countries as well, where young people are taking active ownership of representing their own constituencies and telling their leaders what they want to see. And I think that that's a phenomenal example. But I think that the best example is actually the youth-led mobilization to create the UN Youth Office that was recently established. And seeing the way that the young people mobilized and said, we want formal infrastructures in our UN system to represent our constituencies. And seeing that take effect is a really good example of the ways that young people can mobilize and come together across all different regions to advocate for what infrastructure that they need to ensure their proper representation.
Fantastic, and I think you're actually setting the scene for the next question.
Oh.
How can youth can mobilize and create infrastructures and platforms to get their voices heard? I really love that. So now, the same way youth can come together in that way, something that kept on also coming back this week as I was attending different sessions was leaving no one behind. Stop working silos, leaving no one behind, right? So, how can we ensure that marginalized groups and underrepresented youth from certain parts of the world that would not have access to, they would not have the opportunity to be with us here in person, and also they would not have access to digital tools where they can follow us online? How do we include them? How can we ensure they're actually part of these dialogues, these SDG related dialogue? Honorable.
In my previous submission, I was talking about how to reach to the rural communities. Of course, being in the rural or more local communities is exclusion for me, because, like I said, not many people in those communities have access to information. So access is one, creating that access. For what we have done in Sierra Leone, we've done a lot. If I begin to talk about it, we'll spend the whole day. So we have a program called the Radical Inclusion. Radical Inclusion, we have even encouraged even pregnant girls to go to school, so they don't miss school. So we have them. And also we looked at the area of PWDs, persons living with disabilities. What our government has done through the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development was they developed what we call the Braille version of the SDGs. So people with that are physically blind and have access and understand this. So that tells you how inclusive we are as a government or as a country, wanting everybody to participate. But the catch there is not enough resources to be able to reach out those people that do not have access. So the other thing that is keeping these SDGs not being fully achieved is the lack of access for especially people coming from the low developed countries, countries that are not developed, so that we can increase the accessibility of information from people in the slums, people in local communities, that they can understand. Now you're talking about this hybrid meeting. How many people even understand how to even connect so that they would have access to the information? So we need more radical approaches that will help at least create awareness among communities, so that people will be able to participate in conferences like this or in other related events that will help promote the advancement of or amplifying the SDGs. Because of lack of time, let me give the other speakers
Yes,
time so that they can
you really
talk
mentioned
about
like access is definitely
access.
key.
Yeah,
Jose?
so I'll speak directly to y'all as young people about things that I hope that you do to continue to promote access, because you are now champions of the SDGs. I dub the congratulations. It's really important when you get to be in spaces like this, not to gatekeep access and information. Gatekeeping has no place in advancing the SDGs. When you leave this space, you're all going back to your own individual communities. It makes no sense for you to keep that information that you've been able to learn here. Like, you have to go out and spread that, because the people that you're spreading it to might have access different than your own and can spread it to people that you might not have had access to, and so on and so forth. Being loud and generous with your time and your resources, both physical resources and also your intellectual resources, provides access in ways that you might not even understand when you're sharing information. So the student thank you. The student org that's not your student org, but has an idea that you might be able to support. They might have somebody attend a meeting that wasn't going to come to your meeting. So you've been able to help, even not directly, tangentially. Also, it's really important when you're in spaces like this to connect with not only the panelists, not only the ministers, not only the fancy people who have titles, but also your peers. Because in 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, y'all are going to be the doctors, y'all are going to be the ministers, y'all are going to be the financial analysts. And so being able to build those partnerships and work towards making a better world from the jump. You can say, oh, we've known each other since back in the day when we were at the youth conference, and now look at us making actual tangential change in our respective countries. Like, y'all, it's an international conference. How many opportunities day to day, well, you live in New York, so like maybe, but like, how many opportunities do you get to say, oh, I'm networking with young people who live across the globe? Like, take advantage of that. As cool as we are, I promise you the people in the audience are way cooler. And so like, don't ever underscore that. Like, make sure you're getting to know your peers as much as you're getting to know the people who you don't see as peers.
I definitely want to echo here what you said, Jose. I think we all have a role to play in this. We all have responsibilities. We're so lucky to be in this room and to take part in these very important conversations. And so, you know, when we go back home, we are all ambassadors. That's what it is. So you are now responsible to spread the message in your, you know, in your community, within your family, your cousins, your friends at school, in your workplace. It is up to you to go ahead and share what you've learned. I shared earlier that I've been attending the CSW for the past 7 years, and every time I leave this area, I'm frustrated because nobody knows about it and nobody knows about what's happening here. So what we started doing when we returned to the UK, we kind of do like, did you know fact? Or we get people together. Well, we're coming back from the UN. This is what we discussed. And, you know, this is what it means for you as a person, right? So I think we can all do that when we return to our, you know, constituencies. So, Jainabu?
Yes,
Yeah.
I saw also the 5 minutes.
Yeah, the 5 minutes. So literally, this is going to be the last question, and then we open the floor. We take 2-3 questions, and then we close.
Okay, I will just say also we can also create, as you mentioned, inclusive space for dialogue that seek those people perspective and provide and make sure that their voice is heard, and then also invest in accessible educational program and capacity building also that is tailored to their needs and program. And then also, I would say also to foster like partnership between like government, civil society, and businesses that create opportunities for those youth that you already mentioned that you do in your country.
Thank you so much. Public-private partnerships, definitely, definitely. Rory?
I definitely agree with that. And I also think it's important to take an intersectional approach to everything as well. Operate in the mindset of taking a step up, step back leadership role. Think about the intersectionality between the SDGs and think about how does your SDG relate to other communities. For example, you could think about girls with disabilities and how they're more likely to experience domestic violence, for example, than girls without disabilities. Think about how your SDG affects other people as well and bring them into the conversation instead of operating in silos. I know that we all have our causes that we're particularly passionate about because of our lived experience, because of the work that we do, and that's great, but it's also important to expand outside of the work that we already do and think about, well, how does that work affect other people? Because that's how you facilitate partnerships. When you think about how all these causes are interlinked and how all of these fights are intersectional, it's a great way to really amplify voices that may or may not be marginalized and really bring them into it. And that's how you create accessible spaces where everybody feels included.
Thank you so much, Rory. And thank you to this incredible panel. I think we have under 5 minutes left. Can we take some questions from the floor? Can we take 1 or 2 questions? No? We have to close?
Just one maybe.
Okay, so we'll take 1 question. Okay, I'm hesitating here. Yeah?
In the back.
Okay, so let's take,
Okay, thank you so much for this impressive session. My name is Ali from the Gambia. I just have a quick question to ask. Like, in your own understanding, what do you think we could do when it for local governments? Because I know the UN or international bodies has to be localized. What do you think they could do to empower youths, create seed funding in their budgets? Like most of the time in my country, we don't have these kind of things. A lot of youth initiatives die because they don't have the funding resources. How could government include this kind of seed fundings in their budgets to help youth implement green businesses? Because these green businesses, we all know, would be a crucial part to achieving the SDGs, because these businesses start fresh and we could always, move in a track that is in line with the SDGs. So how could we, help? How could the governments help? Because I'm speaking from experience.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. That's a brilliant question. And I think that question will be directed to Honorable Aissata. So the questions were around how can the government be involved in providing seed funding to new startup, new companies?
Okay, initially I told you my government is focusing on feed salon, looking at agriculture. So agriculture can be one way of financing or providing seed products or inputs for young people. This is why the first thing we need to do is building on human capital development. You build the capital of the people. You encourage them, you empower them to be strong, to be resilient, and also have the technical know-how so that once you give them the opportunity, they will be able to translate those opportunities. One thing about young people as well, I think, is not only giving them those opportunities, but also encouraging them to desist from those things that will negatively impact on themselves and the opportunities that they are going to face. Because today we are facing a world where most young people in my country are involved into drug abuse, just the use of substance, which is also negatively impacting whatever efforts you make as a government or as civil society organizations. Once they have negatively impacted, then it does not make too much sense for it. So everything would be like a lose-lose situation. So we need to take notes of this and ensure that whatever it is we're planning or whatever it is we want to do as young people, we should have the technical know-how, the ability, and the passion to be able to attach ourselves into what we want to see our future. We don't always have to rely on governments.
Very valid point. Yeah. Thank you so much, Honorable. I think we can take some final, Rory, can we take like your final takeaway from this session and we do a round and we wrap up?
Absolutely. So I think that this session has focused a lot on the power that young people have and the importance of facilitating partnerships and also thinking outside of our own silos, looking at other countries, for examples, looking at different sectors, for example, and really thinking about the ways that we can mobilize people across the world to advocate for the SDGs.
Thank you so much. Jainabu?
Okay, I will just say that partnership for the SDG is really valuable and it's a necessity for all the youth. And then also it's a global issue. So and then this issue really affect the youth. We are the one that will inherit everything. So by putting the youth in front of, we just not only tackle that issue, but also we are doing some solution for a sustainable development future.
Thank you, Jaina. Also,
You're already doing the work, and the work that you do in your own local communities is the international work. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Honorable Aissata.
I just would like to say that we should, whatever we want to do, it should be meaningful in reflecting on the lives of others, not only for ourselves. Because when you look at this room, you see elites. My focus is those people that do not have access, like the access you have. What do you do to help them? That is what our focus should be. And that should be, by the time we come back next hunger, we should be able to have created change. We should come with concrete things to say, oh, this is what I have done. I've reached out to 50 young people, and this is what the outcome is.
Fantastic. And this is exactly what I'm going to echo. I think literally the thread throughout this whole conversation was around access, and we all have a role to play. We are so lucky to be in this room and to take part in these really important dialogues. And really, like, we all, when we go back to our constituencies, let's be the ambassadors, let's share the information, let's be loud, and let's follow through. Let's come back next year again with some concrete examples of, of some people that we have empowered. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this session, and a round of applause.